We are going to do some older Unity songs you might know if you've been in Unity for a while. We thought we'd bring those back and pay homage to all the people who've been in Unity and who've been building this brand, if you will. This center and the centers across the world for all these years and have gotten them to where they are now so that we are able to come and be blessed. So we'd love for you to stand and sing with us. Hopefully you'll recognize them. And if they're pretty simple if you don't. It's in every one of us to be wise. Find your heart, open up both your eyes. We can all know everything without ever knowing why. It's in every one of us, by and by. Let's sing that again. It's in every one of us to be wise. Find your heart, open up both your eyes. We can all know everything without ever knowing why. It's in every one of us, by and by. There's actually a second verse that's similar to the first, so you can sing along with that as well. It's in every one of us to be free. Find your heart, let yourself simply be. We can all have everything without ever knowing how. It's in every one of us, here and now. Let's sing that one again. It's in every one of us to be free. Find your heart, let yourself simply be. We can all have everything without ever knowing how. It's in every one of us, here and now. It's in every one of us, here and now. Here and now. You guys sound great. Hi.
You're going to stay standing. Turn to meet the person next to you. Give your name, say hello, welcome to Unity. Okay. Yes. You can cross the aisle if you want to. Okay. All right. Hey, good Christina, Jim. Okay, would you please, now that you're seated, turn off your cell phones, spend an hour in the beauty and the bliss of truth, and then you can get back into the world if you so decide. Is there anybody here except Christina and Jim who are from another Unity, any place? Oh yes, what Unity are you from? Phoenix. Okay. What's the weather like down there? Is it hot? It's already hot. All right, Unity of Phoenix. Who's the minister down there now? Richard Barrage. Okay. Okay, well listen, we welcome you here to Unity of Boulder, and we appreciate you showing up, and I think you're going to really enjoy this message that we have. Is there anybody here for the first time? This is your first time here. We have a gift for you. If you're here for the first time, put your hand up high. Okay, good. Yes. Very good. Well, today Shad is going to be sharing a talk about true relationships, which you have to go within and understand. It's going to be a great talk. You're going to love this talk. So I'll just give a little story to start it off. This woman rushes home and shouts, "Honey, pack your bags. I just won the lottery." The husband says, "Wow, that's great. Should I pack for the ocean or the mountains or what?" She says, "I don't care. Just get the hell out."
I have no idea what that story had to do with. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unity of Boulder. My name is Mike Shadle. I'm the administrator here. If you ever have any questions, comments, concerns about anything involving Unity of Boulder here, my office is right over here in the bookstore. Please come in and say hello, and we'll have a little chat. I'm always open to that. I got a few announcements to start things off with. First of all, starting next week and going throughout the entire summer, our 9 a.m. service is now going to actually start at 8:30 in the morning, and it's going to be a meditation service led by Jack and Norma. It'll have a smaller talk with more meditation. We'll have our Norma will play her chakra bowls out here each week. So come on out for that, and that'll happen every week no matter who's actually doing our 11 a.m. service. So if you've never checked out that service, it's a great time to check it out. It's a beautiful service. Yesterday, Santisha and I and a bunch of other volunteers from both here and Columbine Unity, we had a booth, and we have one today and tomorrow at the Boulder Creek Festival. If you happen to go to the Creek Fest, stop on in at the booth, say hello, and hang out with us. You can tell it's us because we're the booth that's having by far the most fun of all the other booths in the area. And what we're really trying to do with this booth here is just get the word back out there of Unity outside of our own little circle and tell people what Unity is. And so we've partnered, we're not even just promoting Unity of Boulder, we're promoting Unity as a whole. And so we've partnered with Columbine Unity. There's a few volunteers there from both our churches. So that's just one of the things we're doing right now to try and get the word of Unity out to everyone. Another thing we're doing is we made up these bumper stickers that we'd like to hand out now to anyone who would like to put one on their car. We really want to give them to people who want to put them out on their car and not on their refrigerator in their garage or their guitar case. So if you'd like one, please put your hand up, and we'd love to give you one. We just really want to get people knowing and remind people that Unity is still here. Even if they find Unity at a different Unity church, we just want to help grow all of Unity with this. So we have a volunteer. His name's Joel Gutman. He was here at first service, so he's not here right now, but he runs our entire garden in the back. Real quick, here's some pictures of, this is Shad and Erina's car right here with their sticker on it. This is Jack and Norma's car. This is a random car Shad and Erina just decided to put a sticker on in a parking garage down on Pearl Street Mall. So just a few of the mostly legal things we're doing to promote Unity here. Oh, forgot I had that slide. We have a garden out back. It's run by a good friend of ours and volunteer named Joel Gutman. And if you haven't been back there in a while, I urge you to go check it out. It is one of the most beautiful little gardens in Boulder now, with all the work he's done to it. There's so many great little spots out there to meditate in. We still have our labyrinth out there. And if you're looking for a garden plot to have your own little garden, let us know in the bookstore or in the lobby, and we can get you set up for that. There's still a few available. So we just want to say thank you to Joel Gutman for that one. Now, in your handout you got when you walked in, there's a little piece of paper in there where you can just kind of let us know how you feel about the idea of us having a Saturday service, whether that's something you'd be interested in. It'll just take a second. You can put it in the tithe bag during the offering. We just want to know, we're just trying to gauge on whether that's a good idea or not. Just would you come to that, or are you still only coming on Sunday? So please let us know about that. Right now, we have our election going for our board of directors. The voting station is an information station. It's out in the lobby. You can go out there and read about the people who are up for election. And then there's a little ballot. You can vote for 2 people on one ballot. We urge you to please do that. If you've already done it, don't do it again. And next week, after second service, that's when voting closes, and that will be followed by our annual financial meeting, which we will let it be known who won the election. And at our financial meeting, that is here in this room, and it's open to anyone who wants to come and find out throughout the year where all our money that comes in, where it goes, what we've done with it. And it's just a great way to really find out kind of the inner workings of Unity of Boulder. It's not the most exciting meeting, so I'm not going to tell you that it's a party, but it is really interesting. So everyone's welcome to come for that next week. We also have our Sunday school teacher appreciation ceremony following our second service, and we also have our YOU, that's our high school age congregants downstairs. They're having their graduation ceremony at the end of second service next week as well, so stick around for that. This Thursday, come join me in Fellowship Hall here at 10:30 for a newsletter mailing. We always have a really good time. We just hang out, we laugh, we have so much fun. You literally forget you're just folding newsletters that we send out. It's a super easy way to help Unity of Boulder. Even if you only have an hour, a half hour, just stop on in. You don't have to sign up or anything. And we got snacks and music. And next week we will be showing a movie in our in-house movie theater that Shad and I built downstairs a few weeks ago. This movie is called Not Easy, Grow Up. It's about a boy named Micah who's grown up with cerebral palsy, and this documentary has been made using footage taken over 30 years of his life to show what the reality of growing up with something like cerebral palsy truly is, and it really shows the tears and the joy. It's a very touching movie. It's $3 to come on in. It's 2:00, and it will be followed by an open discussion led by Jack afterwards. So come out for that one. And finally, I'd just like to let you know that we here at Unity of Boulder are an all-inclusive community. No matter what cultural or religious background or relationship orientation, everyone is welcome here. Unity of Boulder is a safe and enlightened place, and through inclusivity and a collective spiritual practice, we know we will transform this whole world.
Let's take a few moments to enter into the reality of the presence of God. Just take a couple of deep breaths. And with each breath, rest in the awareness of that divine presence of wholeness, peace, and love. Just breathing, letting go of the world. being here, knowing all is well, as we enter the presence of wholeness, peace, and love. We release any concerns of the past, any fears for the future. We know that we can rest and be healed, rejuvenated, and brought into the wholeness of the living God. We rest in the wholeness, the peace, and the love of the living God. A prayer of gratitude goes out to all of the volunteers that make Unity happen every week. Our greeters and ushers, those who volunteer in the office, those who volunteer in the kitchen and in the garden, those who volunteer throughout this church, and they make Unity happen. And so for all of them and for all of you, and for the blessings we receive, just knowing we're always in the presence of that greater intelligence and love, which we acknowledge to be God. To this we say, Amen. I just want to remind you that if you have a particular challenge you're facing at this time and you'd like to pray with someone, then just remain seated. When this service is over, one of our prayer partners will come and take you down to our beautiful meditation room and share a prayer with you.
So in keeping with our old Unity, past Unity music, we're going to sing Weave, which is a famous, very popular song in our movement. And I wanted to thank Sandy Spahn. She's the one who reminded me of this song. Sandy, would you stand up and just say hi? She's been in service at Unity of Boulder for quite a while. So thank you. So we thank you, and this song goes out to you. And please sing along with us. You know this.
Together.
diversity. Now the Christ in me is the Christ in you. In one big family weave us together. Weave us together in unity and love. Weave us together. Weave us together, together in love. Weave us together. Weave us together in unity and love. Weave us together. Weave us together, together in love. Thank you.
Good morning. How are we today? Got some hecklers in the front row down here. Much more of this, and you'll have security throw them out. By the way, did you see this beautifully branded tumbler I have here? You too could have one of these if you sign up for recurring giving over there in the lobby area. It comes free with that, so this tells you I'm a recurring giver. Anyway, all right. I do want to say ahead of time that I am going to follow this service with a group discussion over there in the back corner. If you'd like to join me for that, I'd love to have you be a part of that. So if you have any questions or comments that come to mind, you can write them down during the service, and we can address them over there after the service. I won't have much time because I still have to prepare for a class this afternoon I'm teaching. So please come promptly and grab your snacks and drinks and meet me over there. All right? We're all okay with that? 13 people are okay with that. The rest of you, meet me over there and we'll discuss it later. Let's get going with our words of wisdom. These words are from Peter F. Drucker, who said, "It's more important to do the right thing than to do things right." Who agrees with that? Sounds like most of us agree with that. I would guess that most of us would consider that to be true. After all, growing up, we are told quite often, do the right thing, make responsible choices. And this is a pretty simple concept. It's pretty straightforward. Or is it? Because that message, that statement, do the right thing, actually makes a very large assumption. And the assumption is that you know what the right thing to do is, right? It makes a very grand assumption. So if you were told that as a kid growing up, has anyone ever told that growing up by their teacher or their parents or something, do the right thing? There's a very grand assumption there going on behind the scenes. So what is the right thing? Do you always know what the right thing is? Who here always knows what the right thing is? I knew we'd have at least one. I knew we'd have at least one. First service we got by with no one, but this, if anyone else needs to know what the right thing is, Lene's happy to help you. Okay, thank you, Lene. And she probably does, actually. All right. So early on in childhood and growing up, the right thing is actually quite a bit more simple because we're given very clear instructions. Do this, don't do that. This is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. So discerning the right thing is not too difficult at that stage of the game. But as you grow and mature into an adult and you go out into the world, you recognize that things are not always so black and white. There's a lot of gray area in life, and the right and the wrong don't show up so obviously to you. So now you have to discern what is the right thing in this new scenario. And especially as you grow spiritually, your concept of right and wrong, your concept of the right thing is going to morph and expand and unfold before you, where before the right thing might be mostly focused on the finite and what's happening in the microcosm. But as you begin to unfold spiritually, it goes to the macrocosm. You start looking beyond yourself, beyond just what's around you, and getting more expanded view. So really we are faced with a dilemma. We know we should do the right thing, but we're not sure what the right thing is. So let's see if we can sort of establish some sort of baseline right now that we can all agree on what the right thing is. And without building a complicated backstory behind it, like we all love to do in Unity, is it good or should you steal somebody else's car? Some of you still thinking about you're building that backstory. You're like, well, if someone was pregnant and they're about to give birth, and no backstories. So we pretty much can agree. It's pretty straightforward. If you want to do the right thing, you don't steal somebody's car. And we could consider that sort of a basic morality. We can consider that a basic healthy morality that is established among people. But morality is a fascinating thing to play around with. Because in many ways, we assume morality is the same for all of us, or should be the same for all of us. And anyone who acts out of alignment with what we think morality is, we consider them to be wrong or unnatural or immoral because of their actions. But if some things are moral and some things are immoral, who gets to decide? Who gets the final say there? Who gets to set the standard for the moral code that we must all live by? Now we're starting to get into some sticky territory. Because for hundreds of years, the old religion had the concept that they got to set the moral code, and they got to enforce this moral code. But it has become quite clear over time that their sense of morality is often biased and warped and dangerous and not even in alignment with their own beliefs and their own truth. Well, all of this leads to something I heard months ago that I have wanted to talk about every time I've heard it, but it hadn't quite placed itself in the right spot. So we're actually going to finally cover it today. And what I heard, what inspired me, was an episode of the podcast Radio Lab. Is anyone here familiar with the podcast Radio Lab? Okay, good. So I was afraid when I wrote this talk that no one would have any concept of what I'm talking about, but 8 of you do. So the rest of you, we're going to have a small time for you to get together and figure out what it is from the other people who know what it is. It's a podcast. That's all you need to know. We're going to move on. I'll explain it. Radiolab is one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. And when I ministered in Las Vegas at Unity of Las Vegas, I talked about Radiolab a lot in my Sunday sermons. So much so that I thought about changing the church's name from Unity of Las Vegas to Unity of Radiolab. Thought maybe that might draw some more people through the front door. And what I think is great about this graphic I created for you this morning is that I managed to violate 3 trademarks in one image. So I'm pretty proud of myself there. But let's get on with our topic for today. The specific Radiolab episode I'm referring to is entitled The Trolley Problem Update from September 27th, 2017. And for us to really get into this concept and understand it, I will unfortunately have to introduce you to a somewhat morose thought experiment. So please bear with me. I did not come up with this. This is a very old and actually widespread thought experiment, quite well known to most people. And this experiment is important because it pushes us to really look at the core of our morality and to look at what triggers our morality to spring into action, to do something. So here is how it goes. You are an observer. You are watching a trolley that is barreling down the tracks. That trolley cannot see what is ahead, but you can. You see that there are construction workers working on the track up ahead. They are unaware of the trolley, and the trolley is unaware of them. You, as the observer, also notice 5 of them are working on the track that goes straight ahead, but only 1 of them is working on the track that diverts off to the side. Now, lo and behold, you realize you are standing by the track switch that could divert the trolley away from the track with the 5 people on it onto the track towards a person with 1 on it. And now you realize you could do something about what is about to unfold. You could pull that lever, divert that trolley onto the other track and save 5 lives at the expense of 1 life. So here is the thought experiment. Do you pull that lever? Now remember, before you decide in your head, if you choose to pull that lever, you will save 5 lives. But by doing so, you will consciously and willfully be choosing to take the life of that one. On the other hand, if you choose not to pull the lever, fate will go on uninhibited, and the 5 people will lose their lives just like they would have if you had never come on this scene. Time is running out. What do you do? So raise your hand if you would pull the lever to save the 5 at the expense of the 1. First service had a little more guts, but that's okay. This thought experiment has actually been a part of countless actual studies, psychological studies, including one that they spoke about in the Radiolab episode I was watching or listening to. And by and large, your average person, after they think about it, chooses to pull that lever. They choose to do that. So we might say this established sort of a baseline for humanity or morality for humans. Given these circumstances, we often will choose to save 5 lives over 1. And Spock would definitely agree with that choice because he said the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Very wise, logical man. Does everyone know who Spock is, or are you totally lost right now? I hope at least 3/4 of you know what Spock is. If that's your first question in the group in the back, don't bother. That's not really where we're going with the conversation. Okay. You thought you were off the hook, but the experiment actually gets more complicated now, and we're going to really play with your moral compass. And again, I apologize for the subject matter. It is pretty dark, but this is how the experiment goes. Similar scenario, but now you are standing on a bridge. You still see a trolley coming, unaware of the 5 workers ahead on the track. And this time, there is no track to divert that trolley onto, but you do still have a choice. Would you physically push a person off that bridge onto the tracks in order to stop the trolley and save the 5 people? 1 for 5. Again, horrifying, I know. I did not come up with this, but just bear with me on this as we move forward. Here is why this gets really interesting. Fundamentally, this is the exact same choice. Take 1 life in order to save 5. But study after study shows that 9 out of 10 people would not physically push that person to save 5 people. Now, I find that fascinating, and researchers also found this fascinating, because logically, it is the same exact outcome. You have chosen 1 life versus 5 lives. But morality draws a line in the sand just in the subtle difference between touching a lever and touching a person. It draws a line in the sand right there in terms of that outcome. Now, Jad Abumrad and Robert Coleridge, if you know, are the hosts of the show, and they are interviewing in this episode a Princeton researcher by the name of Josh Green, who has studied this phenomena at length. And he asks a very basic, fundamental question in this clip.
How do people make this judgment? Forget whether or not these judgments are right or wrong, just what's going on in the brain that makes people distinguish so naturally and intuitively between these 2 cases, which from an actuarial point of view are very, very, very similar, if not identical.
So he did a study connecting people to a brain scanner. And he presented them with this scenario of being on the bridge, and he would run the scan at the moment they were making the decision of what they would do to see which part of the brain would light up. This is clearly a morality issue requiring higher advanced thinking, and so we would assume, if we know the brain, a certain area is going to light up. But at the moment of the decision, what he found was it was not the frontal lobe that lit up, not the higher, more advanced part of the brain that lit up, but it was actually the lower part of the brain, the primal reptilian part of the brain, the oldest part of the brain, that was lighting up to make this choice. Now, why would this more simplistic part of the brain be chiming in on such a complicated issue? Well, this is what he has to say.
Our primate ancestors, before we were full-blown humans, had intensely social lives. They have social mechanisms that prevent them from doing all the nasty things that they might otherwise be interested in doing. And so deep in our brain, we have what you might call basic primate morality.
Which is interesting because in spirituality and religion, we often make the assumption that our animal or primal instincts are connected to the ego, and therefore they are bad and should be eradicated. But our animal ancestors have actually always had a very strict and clear moral code that they lived by, thousands of years before we ever showed up on the scene. And many religions would take issue with me saying that, but in Unity we see God manifesting in and through all creatures, in and through evolution, and that all of it is just a part of the beautiful dance of the divine. None of it is excluded in that process. So back to Josh Green, who calls this primal moral compass our inner chimp.
Now that case, I think it's a pretty easy case. Even though it's 5 versus 1, in that case, people just go with what we might call the inner chimp. But there are other...
The inner chimp is your unfortunate way of describing an act of deep goodness.
Right, well, that's what's interesting.
It's up 10 commandments for God. Inner chimp.
Right, well, what's interesting is that we think of basic human morality as being handed down from on high. And it's probably better to say that it was handed up from below.
You see, the early church was able to gain so much power and control because they convinced everyone that morality came from on high, and that they were the only ones that had access to on high, which put them as a go-between. But in reality, and like we say in Unity, it is all already right here within you. There is nothing in between you and the divine. It is all already right within you. Morality all along was built into your genetic makeup the moment you were born. It was not handed down from on high, and they even debate, was it handed down from parents? And they say, no, it doesn't appear that it was handed down from your parents or your social surroundings. You were born with morality. So instead of vilifying our animal ancestors and brothers and sisters, we could have been learning from them for the last few thousand years. But we vilified them as lower and degrading and not knowing much. So in its basic form, morality is instinctual, as they're discovering. We may think we are making a choice from this really intellectually advanced place because we're humans and we're special, but really it comes down to a basic instinct, not the movie. I could have set a stopwatch just to see how long that took to roll out. Okay. So really, what is happening is it's not this reasoning intellect that is making these choices. Really, it is our deep-seated primal instincts that are making these choices. They are what is steering the bus in these moments. And here is where this episode got very fascinating to me. For thousands of years, we have faced some very basic situations as animals. For example, a chimpanzee learns early on that you don't push another chimpanzee out of a tree. It's bad for the individual. It's bad for the group as a whole, the family structure that they live in. You just don't do that. That's going to be a very early basic lesson that they're going to learn. That then is now imprinted in our primal code. You don't push another chimpanzee out of the tree. So when faced with the bridge scenario, that primal instinct, that inner chimp screams out, no, don't push. Even if logically, as Spock pointed out, it is better to save 5 over the 1. The inner chimp overrules the logical mind and says, don't push, we don't harm another. But in the scenario with the switch, that is something more complicated than our primal ancestors ever faced before. There were no trolleys, there were no tracks or mechanical systems that could put so much space between cause and effect. This is crucial, so I need you to listen and understand this point. For thousands of years, if you were to cause another chimp to fall out of a tree, you had to physically push that chimp. There was no button, there was no lever that could put separation between you and the act of making that chimp fall. Does that make sense? It was a very hands-on experience. So, the trolley scenario where you can pull a switch is completely uncharted territory for the inner chimp. It cannot relate to this. So it doesn't recognize it as a morality issue, and therefore allows a different voice to come to the surface and make that choice. So we see that the inner chimp operates from a very basic understanding of morality due to its lack of experience with these complicated systems we now have today. These complicated scenarios that it never faced before. It has the best intentions. The inner chimp has the best intentions, but morality has gotten way more complicated since humanity came on the scene. And some might say morality has plummeted in the last few decades. So, we might ask, what has happened to our internal moral compass?
And basic primate morality doesn't understand things like tax evasion.
Basic primate morality doesn't understand things like tax evasion. Tax evasion does not trigger that internal moral compass because our inner chimp never had to deal with taxes. It doesn't understand modifying your taxes to get more gain for yourself at the expense of others. It doesn't understand the ramifications of not filing your taxes. It doesn't even understand why you would file your taxes. That did not exist for thousands of years. Now listen to this because it just might help you finally understand the world around you. The inner chimp also never dealt with deforestation, water pollution, poverty and income gaps, oil spills, government and corporate corruption, insider trading, drugs, housing shortages, collateral damage, nuclear weapons, guns, human rights, free speech, the internet, and countless other moral issues that plague modern humanity. It never had to face any of those. People in seats of power today are dealing with situations that require an incredibly heightened sense of morality. But in many cases, they have nothing to draw from because their inner chimp is confused and therefore silent. So they can go ahead and allow their company to dump toxic chemicals into a public water supply, or they can release a product that actually does more harm to people than good, because our complex systems have allowed us to be separated from the results of our actions. We have put too much distance between cause and effect. Too much for us to be able to feel that connection, which would trigger our inner chimp to say, no, we don't do that. For example, people think, who am I really hurting if I'm illegally downloading music off the internet? There is way too much distance from the person sitting at their computer and the musician who wrote that song for their morality to be triggered and say, I'm hurting a person. But we would never walk up to a street musician and pull $1 out of their guitar case. Do you see what I'm getting at? Because as we have seen time and time again, take a person who's willing to do harm from a great distance and place them next to the person or people they are doing harm to, and they cannot do it. A few weeks ago, Reverend Jack shared a documentary with you called Sacrifice, and some of you might have had the pleasure of actually watching that movie. In that documentary, we follow Phil. This is Phil, a white American man who is a racist and takes issue with Mexicans. This is a documentary. This is a real man. This really happened. He is racist for all the same nonsense reasons that too many people get tricked into believing. And I want you to hear that very clearly. They get tricked into believing. So they take this Phil, this gentleman here, and they put him alone in a room with another Mexican man, roughly his age. And they place them in 2 chairs facing each other, maybe just a few feet apart. And they tell them that they have to stare into each other's eyes for an indefinite period of time. And after just a few minutes, you get to watch one of the most incredible things happen that has ever been caught on film. You watch this man close the gap, remove the distance between himself and his own ignorance. His ignorance was at large. It was so far away that he never had to be faced with it. But they closed the gap and they put it just inches away for him to see. And the facade of who he was tricked into believing he was completely melts away right before your eyes. To the point where he is compelled by the power of love, the same power that moves through every single thing, every single individual on this planet. He is compelled by his heart to stand up and walk over and give that man a hug. A perfect stranger who was once his enemy, who was different from him, who was unlike him, who was another race, who was an inferior, and he could not help but walk over and give that man a hug in tears. But in that moment, he closed the gap and couldn't deny the reality of their oneness. He had to live in denial in order to have a consciousness of racism. But when they tore down that gap, he could not deny the reality of their oneness. You see, in that moment, his morality was finally awakened because the situation was simplified. It stopped being about borders and jobs and walls and homeland security. It stopped being about one country versus another or any other nonsense that the inner chimp could not comprehend. In that moment, it was simplified down to the true issue at hand. It was just 2 people sitting in a room. And in that scenario, the inner chimp could quite clearly see, this is my friend, this is my brother, we help each other. We protect each other. We need each other to survive. That is the voice that finally got to speak when all that nonsense was taken away. But for that to happen, the complications and distractions had to be peeled away to reveal the simplicity of the real issue at hand, which is really the only issue at hand. We are in this together, and this experience is much more enjoyable when we work together as one. Now, could that transformation that Phil went through, could that have taken place if they had allowed the 2 men in that room to have their cell phones? It could not have taken place. And the course of that man's life was changed forever. He will never see the world the same way ever again. And it took just a few minutes. But had they had their cell phones, it could not have possibly happened. Not to vilify cell phones, but to bring to light the reality of when they are appropriate and when they are not. The reason being, the inner chimp doesn't understand cell phones. As long as the distraction is present and the situation keeps getting complicated, the gap is too wide for connection to occur. And every time you want to get people charged about an issue and break down that empathy and morality, all you have to do is make it sound really complicated. Get that gap as wide as you can possibly make it. Disconnect us from one to another. And you cannot make the jump. You have to close the gap for that connection to occur. So we're going to do that right now in some meditation. If you're not familiar with the term meditation, just simply recognize this as an opportunity to go within for internal reflection. If you're comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes, to allow your shoulders to relax, to allow yourself to breathe, to slow down. Allow yourself to expand beyond just the limitations of the physical body. Allow that feeling of being something more than what's just sitting right here. We spend so much of our day in judgment, building up these walls of separation, widening the gap with our ignorance, our desires, our perceptions, because we think we know it all. And meditation is one of those tools where we get an opportunity to simply sweep away all that garbage, to clean house, to come home, to be still and present with what truly is. With my eyes closed, I begin to break down the misperception that I see you as apart from me. I might even be able to feel not only myself as bigger than what I usually perceive myself to be, but I might even begin to feel you as a part of that self. If there's one thing we know this world needs, it's healing. And healing occurs when we do what we're doing right now. We slow down. We clear out. We close the gap. And we connect. And how grateful we are to be in a room full of like-minded individuals, sharing in this same truth, this same reality, open and equally ready to connect. And with this gratitude, we move forward into our day, into our week, into our lives, holding on to this essence of truth. And so it is. Amen. So the next time I speak on June 9th, I'm going to do a part 2 onto this message because there's a lot more I wanted to get to that I just couldn't do today. We'll keep that in mind as we take an offering for Unity now. Let's remember that in Unity, when we take an offering, we are making an investment into the type of world we want to live in. A more spiritually evolved and awakened world where these type of connections happen and these walls are breaking down and this ignorance is wiped out. So as we take our offerings into our hands, we're going to bless them with this offering statement, and I invite you to say it with me. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive because I give.
So we are excited to have my friend Claire Amber join us, and she's going to sing a song for us this morning. She's a beautiful mezzo-soprano, and I met her over at our sister church, Columbine Unity, when we did a Peace Through Music event together. So enjoy, Claire.
Danza, danza, fanciulla, mio cantar. Danza, danza, fanciulla gentile, a mio cantar. E leggero sottile, oh suono dell'onde del mar. Sentivo l'amore dell'ora scherzosa che poi corre con languido suon, con languido suon. E che invita danza senza pausa, senza pausa, che invita danza, 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 fanciulla gentile, a mio cantare, a mio cantare. Danza, danza, mio cantar. Thank you.
It's also nice to see some of Larry's classical chops come out now and then. Good job, Larry. All right, so we do have recordings of this talk available in the bookstore afterwards on video and audio, and then we're going to have fellowship over here on this side with cookie and tea and things of that nature. The group's going to meet in the back of the sanctuary right there, right after the service. So if you want to join me over there, we can have a quick discussion. Next week, we will have Santisha speaking at the 11 o'clock service because we'll be going to the 8:30 meditative service as the first service next week. So don't forget that. You catch Jack and Norma there and have that experience. You can do both services, meditate, fellowship, and lead into the next service. I think that's a great plan. Who's up for that? Yeah, I like your dedication. You're my people. Good. All right, why don't we all rise and rock out to our last song here?
I release
And I let go. I let the Spirit run my life. And my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No more trouble, no more strife. With my faith I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. I release and I let go. I let the Spirit run my life. And my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm Spirit run my life, and my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith, I see the light. I can pray in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. Yes, I'm only here for God. Yes, I'm only here for God.
Yeah. Have a great week.